by my picture in back
Yeah,
of
I was
me.
just about to say, Rona, I think that's...
Oh, we lucked out last year. We're not looking out this year.
No.
Can't afford the snowplow anymore.
We should invest in one. You know, we should have a temple snowplow. We could go around and plow everybody out. You know?
Yeah, my daughter lives in Portland, Oregon, and it's snowing there today. And she said they don't even plow the streets or salt the street. No.
Wow.
No, did I ever tell you, just as a quick aside before we get started, not a Shabbos story, but when I was in college, as I said, in Wisconsin, I took a class called Weather and Climate, which really should be an obligatory class for all of us. And I was taking the final, and the professor was a lifetime Scotty, as they say, from Wisconsin. And one of the questions said, it's April and there's a snowbank on the side of the road. How quickly is the snow going to melt? So I raised my hand and I said, sir, what is a snowbank? Because I couldn't figure out what it was. And he just took one look at me and he said, you're not from around here, are you? So that's a story for another time. But
where you go to cash your checks.
Yeah.
Right.
Very good. Well, it's...
Amiga tá lá.
Sorry, say again.
Eu tenho que botar o vídeo, 1 minuto.
Yep. Okay. All right. So, welcome everybody. Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to mute everybody other than Cantor Lauren and myself. And let's spotlight Cantor Lauren and me. Okay. So hopefully if you're watching on the Zoom, you see the two of us next to each other. If you're watching on the stream, unfortunately, for whatever reason, I still haven't figured out this element of technology. But it's wonderful to see all of you. It's wonderful to be back together in our virtual space and to be with my partner in crime, Cantor Lauren. So we're going to begin this evening, and Cantor Lauren, I believe, is going to be lighting and blessing our candles this evening, but we're going to make a pitch to say we would love for others to be able to do this. We've had a few weeks in which we've been able to welcome some members of the congregation to do this. It doesn't need much other than some candlesticks and some candles, and if you don't have that, you can tell me and we will figure out some way to get them to you, but it's a good way for us to see each other and to connect. So if you're interested in this, please contact Shelly, contact myself. We'll put you on a list. We'll help you in any way, shape, or form. But certainly we're very happy to have Cantor Lauren to do it tonight. If you'd like to follow along, we're on page 120 in our prayer books. And just one other aside before Cantor lights the candles. Right before we were about to begin, unfortunately, her beloved guitar had a bit of a challenge and is broken to be fixed, but not this evening. So in her typical fashion, she has pivoted, and a few of the melodies may be a little bit different than normal, but we put our full faith and trust in her. So, Cantor Lauren, it's all you.
Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We're going to turn now to page 128, and we'll begin with Yedid Nefesh. Yes?
Correct. Yedid Nefesh av harachaman, Yedid Nefesh av harachaman, meshochav decha el retzonecha. Meshochav-decha, Yanai el retzonecha, Yarut avdecha, kemo hayal, Ishtachaveh Yanai el muhadarecha.
We'll turn now to page 130. Page 130 to begin Kabbalat Shabbat, together at the very top of the page.
לכו נרננה לאדוני, נריע לצור אישנו, נקדמה פניו בתודה, בזמירות נריע לו, נקדמה פניו בתודה, בזמירות נריע לו.
And now we will turn to page 131. And I think this is the one, if I'm not mistaken, Candelar, we're going to do something a little different. So maybe you'll explain exactly what's happening.
Great. So I have a piano track for this. So I hope that encourages you to sing along with me. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו, ספרו בגויים כבודו, בכל העמים נפלטה, כי גדול אדוני ומעול מאוד, נורא הוא על כל אלוהים. כי כל אלוהי העמים מלינים, אדוני שמיים עשה, הוד והדול לפניו, עוז ותפארת במקדשו, שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו.
Well, that works surprisingly well. All right, you'll have to explain the magic behind it at some point, Cantor, but that's great. We're going to turn now to page 132, or Zaru, towards the bottom of the page.
Or Zaru ala tzadik, uleish lev simcha. Or Zaru ala tzadik, uleish lev simcha. Simchu tzadikim Adonai, mehudu lezecher kodsho. Simchu tzadikim Adonai, mehudu lezecher kodsho.
Turn now to page 134, Zamru Ladonai, beginning at the top of the page.
Zamru l'Adonai bechinor, bechinor v'kol zimra. 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 Zamru l'Adonai bechinor, bechinor v'kol zimra.
I was muted that whole time. Page 135, Romamu, the last paragraph in Hebrew in the middle of the page.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו.
Turn now to page 138 for Lecha Dodi, and again, we'll do as we do each week, the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המנוחת, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ותפארת ותחילה. lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'ne'echa, ki מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. התעוררי, כי באורך ומיורי, אורי שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלי נפילה. lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Moi v'shalom aterepala, גם בשמחה וצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה. lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela.
We'll turn now to page 140.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות. עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון וכינור. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. צדיק התמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון ישגה, שתולים בבית אדוני, מחתרות אלוהינו יפריחו. עוד ינועו משיבה, דשנים ורעננים יהיו, להגיד כי ישר אדוני צורי, מלוא עוולתמו.
So now for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144, and we'll give the cantor a second to drink some wine.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בלמד דברי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב, ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעולם על מעמיה יתברך, יתברך וישבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי קודשא בריחו, לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירם בעלמא, ויאמרו אמן.
We turn now to page 146 for the Baruch Hu.
Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, Le'olam va'ed, Le'olam va'ed.
We turn now to page 148. We'll read together in English at the bottom of the page. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzvaot is your name. Ever living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening.
ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, המריב הרבים, אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה מצוות חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו למדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכנו וקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד, כי הם חיינו מאורך ימינו, ובהם נגה יומם ולילה, מאהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל.
We're now on page 154. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם emet. We now read together in English on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. As we turn to page 158, Mi Chamoch.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נאמר בקודש, נורא תהי לו רוסי פלא, נורא תהי לו רוסי פלא. מלכותך ראו בניך, פוקי הים לפני משה, זה אלינו ואמרו, זה אלינו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם אין, אדוני ימלוך לעולם אין. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נאמר בקודש, נורא תהי לו רוסי פלא, נורא תהי לו רוסי פלא.
And we'll turn now to page 160, Hashkivenu.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים, ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, לתקננו מצה טובה מלפניך, והושיענו למען שמך, מגן בעדנו והסר מעלינו, אויב דבר לחרב ורב ויגון, נרחק ממנו עוון ופשע ובצל, כנפיך תסתירנו, כי אל שומרנו ומצילנו אתה, כי אל חנון ורחום אתה.
I'd just like to point out that that was what she pivoted to when the guitar broke, right? That's an unbelievable thing. I mean, that's just remarkable. I felt like we were at the high holidays. I mean, it's truly remarkable. So much so that I've lost my place in it for a second. So we're going to turn now to page 162, Vishamra.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, בני ישראל אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
In a moment, Cantor will help us to begin the Amidah together on page 164, and then we will continue silently. And as we began last week, we're going to try to give a little bit more space and time for everyone to have their own opportunity to pray at their own pace. So this may take a little bit of time, probably 4 minutes or so. But if you finish early, use this as your time. Try your best not to turn the television on to pick up your phone, right? Pick up your Siddur. Look and listen to your own heart, your own mind. Take this as a rare opportunity for some quiet reflection. So again, we'll turn it over to Cantor Lauren, who will start us off on page 164, and then we will continue silently.
Adonai sfatai tiftach, ufi hagi tehilatecha. Adonai sfatai tiftach, ufi hagi tehilatecha. Ose shalom imromav, uyase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael. Veimeru, veimeru. Amen.
Turn now to page 371 as our thoughts turn to those in our lives and those connected to us who are in need of healing. In a moment, I'll read a list of those that we know of in our community and connected to our community tonight. But if you have additional names that you feel comfortable to share, you're welcome to add them to the chat or simply to hold them in your hearts. So tonight we are thinking of Brianne Matloff, Boris Sendoverich, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauchuan, Samuel Moskowitz, Audrey Lubo, Evie Romano, Chaim Leib, Andrew Edelman, Robert Posner, Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollack, Jane London, Phyllis Silver, Catherine Guarino, Emunah Chaba, Sandra Furman, Raina Walsh, Deirdre Klein, Stephanie Skit, Judy Stern, Miriam Cornfield, Roz Brody, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Marlise Silverberg, Susan Spruce, Fagel Tzipora Bat Elisheva Bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idle Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Menachem Ben Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Neil Elliott and Eileen Rosen, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Ben Sion Ben Moshe, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kasov, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klopman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, and Leah Bat Naomi. As we add all of the names that have been added in the chat and those that we're holding in our heart, Cantor Lauren will lead us in the Misha Berach on page 371.
Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Thank you, Cantor Lauren. We'll give you a little bit of a break and to wish all of you a Shabbat Shalom. So this weekend we read from Parshat Mishpatim, which for those of you that are familiar with the Hebrew word will know that this is a parsha that is filled with law. Mishpat is one of the kinds of laws that we have within Judaism. The word shofet is the word for judge. So this is a parsha that deals very exclusively in many ways with law, but particularly the kinds of law that we perhaps take for granted. In other words, the kinds of law that is necessary for a society to function when inevitable challenges arise between neighbors, for example, between family members, between a society in itself. And so we get a lot of descriptions of what to do in the event of. And this is really the basis for where the Talmud eventually explodes and goes in many, many different directions. These sort of famous questions about what to do when, for example, an ox falls into a pit in your property and how to deal with that. But this is really, again, the minutia, certainly, but it's a spiritual minutia, right? It's still connected to and ultimately brought to the fore because these are God-given laws and God-given instruction. So they carry a very significant kind of weight. And while a lot of the laws that are being described may not even apply to our ancestors while they're living in the desert, they are thinking ahead to the days in which they will eventually settle in the land of Israel and what is going to be necessary to set up a just society on the one hand and a holy society on the other, and those two things inextricably linked to each other. So each verse of this parsha can be treated on its own. If I'm not mistaken, it's Rashi, but the sort of great commentators say that each one of these verses can and probably should be considered as its own legal issue. But oftentimes, those issues are related to each other. That, as I said, there's a through line of sort of consideration. So there's one pasuk in particular that always seems to grab my attention, but I noticed something a little bit different tonight, and I wanted to share it with you. So some of you may even be familiar with this verse from other circumstances or from other times that I may have even taught it. It appears in the fifth verse of chapter 23 of the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, and it says that when you see a donkey belonging to your enemy lying under its burden, which again, for those of us who are from the era in which we have no concept of what it means to have an animal of a beast of burden, so to speak, in our care, understand that when we're talking about a donkey, we may think about that in sort of almost humorous terms. But to our ancestors, the donkey was their livelihood. It was the ability for them to move from here to there. It would be the equivalent of talking about our cars. If suddenly our car went into a ditch on the side of the road, that's the mentality that you need to have about a moment like this. So if we should see our enemy, sonach, right? Somebody that we have a antagonistic relationship with, and we see their animal struggling under its burden, and this is the key phrase, and we would otherwise choose to refrain from raising it up. In other words, in our minds, we say to ourselves, this guy is my enemy. Why am I going to help him? The Torah teaches us, you must nevertheless raise it with him. Okay, so again, if you see your enemy's property, right, in this case, donkey, in our case, a car on the side of the road, even though you have this antagonistic relationship with, you are obligated, according to the Torah, to help that person, and in particular, to help the animal that belongs to that person. And I suppose I actually introduced a bit of a challenge by talking about it in car terms. There is an animal piece of this which is significant, but we'll put that aside for the moment. So I want to bring now a couple commentaries to help take this and go in a slightly bigger direction. So a very famous commentator who was known as the Tur, was Asher ben Yaakov ben Asher. Asher ben Yechiel is his father. Okay, Yaakov ben Asher, who lives in about the 13th century. So he writes one of the great Torah commentaries, also writes one of the great Talmud commentaries, is one of the most significant rabbis in history. And so the name of his commentary is called the Tur HaAroch, the long. Tur is a, if I remember correctly, it's going to come to me at the end of this. In any case, very significant teacher. And so he explains it as follows, okay? And he focuses on this idea of you would otherwise refuse to help this person, right? In your mind, you're saying, I have no reason to help. So the Torah explains, this is a veiled warning that you must not dare abandon him to his problems just because the owner of the beast on record, the owner of the beast has a record of being hostile to you. On the contrary, you must make every effort to assist such a person, provided that they do their share in enabling the overloaded beast to get rid of its burden. In other words, you have to help them. You don't have to do the job for them. Okay, but again, the Torah is really emphasizing the idea here that whatever our minds may be thinking, we are obligated to behave differently with our hands. Okay, and he's talking about really here that little bit of ourselves that always can find a rationalization for not helping somebody that we have an issue with. He is saying, and the Torah is ultimately telling us, we have no recourse to go that direction. We must help them. Okay. Now I can already imagine a lot of you are very challenged by this concept. I should just add that while the word sonecha in this case refers to an enemy, it could conceivably be referring to an actual enemy. In other words, a person from a foreign country that is an enemy of yours, or from a different clan of some sort. But the rabbis actually generally understand it as simply to be somebody in your neighborhood who you have an issue with. Right, that neighbor who cut down your tree, something along those lines, right? The helicopters, I'm looking at Rona, right? Those kinds of things, right? People who upset you. Doesn't have to be, right, the antagonizer in the national sense. It can be somebody closer to home. So now here's where we're going to get it in an even more interesting scenario. We're going to double down. So the rabbis of the Talmud in Bava Metzia on page 32b, So they bring what's called a Breita, which is a section of sort of contemporaneous rabbinic thought from the era of the Mishnah that doesn't quite make it into the Mishnah, but the rabbis often bring back as proof text later on in the Gemara. If none of that made any sense to you, don't worry, come to my Talmud classes and I will happily teach you. But the idea is that basically here is a story that's going to take this, as I said, a step further. If one encounters a friend whose animal collapsed and is necessary to unload its burden, and at the same time one also encounters an enemy, right, a sonecha, who needs assistance to load a burden onto his animal, the mitzvah is to assist the enemy in order to subjugate one's evil inclination, one's ayin hara, right? It's sort of our natural tendency towards thinking terrible things. Okay, so now the rabbis of the Gemara reason, and if it should enter your mind that the requirement to prevent suffering to animals is by Torah law, okay, in other words, that there is another section of the Torah that says very clearly we have an obligation to take care of animals who are suffering. Okay, so one might say in their own head, I have to help my friend here because his animal has the burden already on, therefore I need to help this animal, right? We rationalize it that way. Okay, this is, of course, right, considerably a preferable action, except the Gemara then says, even if the requirement to prevent suffering of animals is a Torah law, even so, loading his enemy's animal in order to subjugate his evil inclination is preferable. In other words, if you find yourself in a situation in which basically your friend and your enemy are both in roughly the same situation in which their animal is suffering and they need help, according to Baba Metzia, you are meant to help the enemy even in that circumstance. Okay, you're meant to choose your enemy's need over your friend's, and the purpose, we're told, is because we need to subjugate our inclination towards evil. So now I want to share just a little bit of an excerpt from a book from Rabbi Ari Kahn. He wrote a book called Echoes of Eden, and this is a commentary on the book of Shavuot. He says as follows: the rationale offered for this ruling is not immediately apparent. How does the evil inclination come into the picture? If there is a mitzvah to help unload an animal's burden, why would the evil inclination even need to be suppressed? Let us consider the psychological or emotional state of the protagonist of these hypothetical cases. A person sees two people who need his help. One is his friend, who needs help unloading a heavy burden from his donkey, and the other his enemy, who needs help loading a burden onto his donkey. This should be a very simple decision. Help the friend and the suffering animal. But the Talmud goes deeper, examining the emotions behind the action. How does our quote-unquote hero feel when he is not helping his enemy? Would he feel that he has missed out on something he would very much have wanted to do because the Torah commanded him to unload another's burden? Or would he feel justified in his feelings of hatred? Would his Yetzer Tov, his good inclination, be at work helping his friend? Or would his Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, be satisfied that his enemy is left to fend for himself? Would helping his friend and fulfilling the letter of the law, while reveling in his enemy's distress, help create a more refined human being? In other words, what he's saying is the rabbis are concerned with, again, what is psychologically going on in the mind of the person who sees this playing out. And if they should choose to help their friend, are they really helping their friend because it's a mitzvah to help and because we're supposed to help animals? Or is it in fact the possibility that we would really actually rather revel in the suffering of our enemy, right? We help the friend so that we can watch our enemy suffer while he's trying to do whatever it is that he needs to do. So the rabbi continues, it's not hard to imagine this man's amusement and satisfaction with the, quote, beauty of Torah as he helps his friend unload the donkey, all the while aware of his enemies laboriously loading a heavy burden unassisted. Would his seemingly righteous act bring him closer to God, or would it reinforce the selfish and self-righteous tendencies that all people possess, in essence distancing them from God? The Talmud's answer is clear. Even when serving God, even when fulfilling a Torah commandment, we must always strive to perfect ourselves and thus become closer to God. If the evil inclination is strengthened by the performance of a mitzvah, something has gone fundamentally wrong. Thus, in this case, although there is a commandment to help unload the donkey, there is a higher consideration. The purpose of all Torah is to perfect us as human beings and to perfect society. The choice then is clear. So what really is being described here, right? What is Rabbi Kahn talking about? What are the rabbis talking about in the Talmud? What is the concern? The concern is about the circumstance in which I believe this is maybe a misuse, but the German phrase of Schadenfreude, right? Of reveling in the suffering of your enemy, right? Being happy about somebody who you feel like deserves whatever their circumstance may or may not be. And I think that this is one of those sections of the Talmud of our tradition that I struggle with the most, right? The sections about how are we to consider the people for whom we have vehement disagreement? How are we to relate to them? How are we to interact with them? How are we consider even sharing, as I said, a simple experience together with somebody who we otherwise, right? The word sonecha really means somebody that you hate, right? And hates you. It is true hatred. So the idea that our ancestors are so consumed by this, so considerate of it, that they would tell us that it's more important to help our enemy than to help our friends solely because there is a real concern that in our mind, we are going to draw a sense of joy and satisfaction from the suffering of the person who hates us or we hate. And I think that it doesn't take much of a stretch to see that we, I think, throughout history have struggled with this reality, but we struggle with it especially right now. We struggle with the idea of how to even begin to engage with people that either we feel we hate or we feel hate us. And of course, as I said, I struggle with this because I can't imagine in some cases being able to sit down or to even conceivably help a person on the side of the road who has, for example, a Confederate flag attached to the back of their truck. And yet at the same time, this seems to be at least what the Torah is instructing us to do. So I don't bring it to us tonight as a way of saying that each of us, all of you, me, should follow this law to the letter. But I think we need to at least be considering what is at stake and what actually eats away at us in the process, right? The goal of this is not necessarily about helping the person who hates us. It's about guarding against something that can very easily materialize within us when hatred is on the table, or we start to, again, take a certain amount of revelry in the suffering of people who we really have vehement disagreement with. And I worry that we are being eaten away from the inside in that way, that in every direction we are seeing a certain kind of almost perverse joy in seeing the other side of whatever the divide may be in their suffering. And I think that that while we may struggle with this, and while this may not be a panacea, right, it's not so easy to actualize in real life, I think even having the awareness, right, having that little check in our mind that says to us, when we are in a similar kind of circumstance, are we not helping this person because they're our enemy and we are enjoying seeing them suffer? Is that really what we're going to be about? Is that really who we are? Is that what our tradition tells us to be? Judaism is tough in that it has high aspirations for us, many that we don't actually ever achieve. But those aspirations are essential. We can't leave them beside the road, so to speak, because they're hard for us to fathom. Situations like this, teachings like this, pasuks like this that we could read past a million times are the ones that should be standing out to us right now and deserving of the most serious consideration. Okay, at some point in our lives, we are both the person who can be in the position to help and the person who needs the help. And how we're going to respond, we don't always have to just make those decisions on the fly. Our tradition provides us with a tremendous amount of material to consider. And so I think as a homework assignment for all of us, it would be worthwhile over this Shabbat to really think about this pasuk and think about where we fit into this equation, and really to be particularly careful of those times in which our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination, begins to take hold of us. It can start very subtle. It can start in very small ways, but soon it's consumed us and our behavior will change as a result. So with that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom, and I hope a Shabbat ultimately of consideration at this really remarkable parsha. So Shabbat Shalom again, and I'll invite you now to turn to page 586 with me at the bottom of the page as I welcome Cantor Lauren back. And again, we're on page 586, the second paragraph at the bottom of the page. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלכי המלכים, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We're now on page 591. V'nehemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz Bayom hahu, Yeh Adonai echad, Ushemo, Ushemo echad. I'll now invite those in mourning and those observing yahrzeit to rise in body or spirit as we first remember those who have passed in recent months in our community. Miles Ambrose, Fred Eber, Nancy Fisher, Saul Fisher, Edwin Friedman, Sandra Friedman, Lucy Gladstone, Lois Herr, Phyllis Katz, Laura Kurz, Madge Judith Parcher, Steve Popkin, Vera Shaps, Norma Small, Marjorie Weinberg Berman, and Ann Weiss. We also marked the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Gustav Amsterdam, Ola Auerbach, Freddie Bernstein, Phyllis Britz, Irving Busgang, Annette Fisher, Ada Glass, Sheila Glazer, Deborah Greenberg, Roberta Herbert, Bernard Kalkstein, Frank Levitt, Louis Liu, Myrna Massoff, Theodore Meyer, Eva Nadell, Gussie Peller, Emma Rosen, Stanley Schneider, Mildred Schockett, Caroline Schreiber, Marcus Spitz, Jack Spivak, Anna Steinberg, Betty Tobias, Morris Weinberg, and Marvin Weiss. And if you have anyone for whom you're saying Kaddish this evening we didn't mention, and you would like to mention them in the chat, please do so, or simply to hold them in your hearts and minds as we join together on page 598 for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, b'agalav v'zman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam u'li'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Le'ila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Zichronam livracha. May every one of their memories be for a blessing. If you are still standing, you may be seated at home. And Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's now my pleasure to invite up our wonderful board member and dear friend, powerhouse, absolute powerhouse, Rona Klopman, located on the warm beach, bringing us the warmth of Amagansett to Sag Harbor, who's going to help us by reading our announcements this week. And again, Rona, thank you for your years of service to this temple as a board member, as just a wonderful person. And it's great to be able to have you up here. I'm looking forward to hearing all the great things that are coming up. So the cantor and I will take a back seat. You're all set.
Well, thank you. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Shabbat morning services will be live streamed tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Join us on our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. Archive versions will be available for viewing shortly after each service ends. Then join us for Torah study at 12 noon with Rabbi Dan. This Sunday at 2 p.m., we welcome back our previous Rebbitzin, Dasi Berkowitz, on Zoom to talk about her new book, Becoming a Soulful Parent, A Path to the Wisdom Within, and a question and answer with Dasi will follow. Niddah Mitzvah is Monday at 11:30 a.m., and you can email AndreaFagan41@gmail.com for the Zoom link. There was no Hebrew school on Monday because it's President's Day, and the Social Justice Committee will meet virtually at 5 p.m. Rabbi Dan's class on Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and the Prophets is on Wednesday at 12 noon, and the B'nai Mitzvah class will not meet because of the winter break. At 7 p.m. Wednesday, the Social Justice Committee will present part 2 of their Shared Legacies panel discussion. For those who missed part 1 of the discussion, there's a link to a recording of it in this week's e-blast. On Thursday, our Health and Wellness Committee will present a members-only forum on coping and resilience during COVID at 7 p.m. On Friday at 9 a.m., Rabbi Dan teaches his class on Pirkei Avot. Heads up for our Purim celebration with the Megillah reading and the return of our humor group's hilarious Purim Star Wars on February 25th, not to be missed. Check out these and all other programs on weekly e-blasts and on our website calendar. If you're not getting our emails, please let the temple office know. We welcome you to join us after services tonight for a virtual Oneg Shabbat, and Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom, Rona. That was fantastic. We're gonna have you back for this for sure. But really, thank you. Stay warm in the dunes there, and keep fighting the good fight. Okay.
I'm trying.
I know you are. I know you are. We love you, Rona. Thanks so much for doing this. Shabbat Shalom. We'll let you hang back, and I'll bring Cantor Lauren back with me. So just a couple of things that I realized were not on the list, or to emphasize. One is our wonderful Cantor has her practicum coming up this Wednesday at HUC at her big moment to shine, and she is kind enough to share the Vimeo link. So those of us in the community would like to watch. It's Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. So Cantor Lauren, you want to just give us a 2-second explanation, and then we're going to send out the link for it this week. So just keep an eye out for the email about how to get involved. But Wednesday at 10.
Yeah, so I would love for all of you, any of you, to come and join me. It's been pre-recorded. I did that this morning, but the topic is Kabbalat Shabbat, a more traditional Kabbalat Shabbat out of the Birnbaum Siddur. So a lot of Nusach, a couple congregational pieces, and some that you probably heard tonight.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm very much looking forward to it, and we're happy to support you, Cantor Lauren, and all you're doing. And I think maybe I can share also the good news, which is that the Cantor has decided she's going to come back to be with us again next year. So we have her, and we're going to try to hold on to her for as long as we possibly can, but certainly through the summer and otherwise. So very much, very excited about that. So thank you. And just to emphasize a couple of things that Rona pointed out again, Sunday at 2 o'clock with Dasi. Her book is incredible. I finished reading it. I'm the one that's going to be interviewing her. On the one hand, it's about parenting, but on the other hand, it's so much bigger than that. So it's not restricted to you being a parent, being a grandparent, being a kid, it's just great. So sign up, come and see her. She would love to see, especially those that she knew very well from her time here with Rabbi Leon. Definitely, if you can, again, Sunday at 2 o'clock. And then our wellness committee on Thursday, which is full of a really incredible group of people who've really been pulling together and trying to help first, understand what it is that's going on to all of us as a result of COVID, and then to really think about how to actualize a sense of wellness in every conceivable way. So it's rare to have an opportunity to have this many experts in so many different fields talking about a subject that actually affects every single person on the Zoom. So really make every effort that you can. Be there on Thursday at 7 o'clock. Very, very, very important. So with that, we're going to turn it over, I think, to Cantor Lauren for a closing song, and then I'm going to do Kiddush, and then we'll welcome everybody to our virtual Oneg. So Cantor, it's all you.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, ועל כל Israel, ve'imeru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Israel, ve'imeru amen.
If you have grape juice or wine handy, you're welcome to join me on page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam morei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzav banu v'shemahat kodsho b'yahavahu v'ratzon inchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים, כי בנו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך, באהבה ורצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת. Amen. L'chaim, L'chaim, Shabbat Shalom. So we're going to turn off the streaming service. So we'll say Shabbat Shalom to everybody who's watching on the stream. And for those who